It's Matty with another Banter. This week we're talking about pet peeves that folks that do interviews for a living have with folks doing interviews when they have to watch them. Today's guest is Richard Hart, former host of Evening Magazine on CBS, also a professor at the Academy of Art University, award-winning journalist, Emmy award-winning TV personality. Richard, hello.
And I volunteer time with children and old people.
Oh, I didn't pump you up enough.
And I should say it's not just things about interviews you watch, but those you just listen to also on the radio.
Well, we'll get into the pet peeves. I'm going to start by doing a pet peeve that I have. One of my pet peeves is when people go to Wikipedia and do all their prep on Wikipedia, and then ask a question to someone about something they saw on Wikipedia just to get the response that that was made up. You just got that from Wikipedia. So I'm going to read you something I read on Wikipedia about you, and you tell me if it's true or not.
Now, I have to tell you beforehand, I have never looked myself up on Wikipedia, so who knows?
Really?
Really?
Oh, yeah. I do all this. I look myself up I Google myself at least twice a day.
That could be construed. Well, that could be used in a sanity hearing against you in the future. Yeah.
You could take that any way you want to. On Wikipedia, it says under education and milestones, Richard Hart has a physics degree. He is on the official NASA list to be the first U.S. space reporter journalist.
True.
Oh.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, the list is, well, I'll give you the short version of it. Years ago, NASA said, yeah, we have so many applications and requests to send up a civilian into space just to report on it that we're going to undertake a formal process. And people around the world, well, they said the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a journalist in space. So they accepted applications from journalists around the country. 3,000 people applied. And they finally whittled it down to a list of 1,000 people. And eventually the list was down to 300. They had committees review the applications. And they called the remaining 300 of us down to Southern California to a university campus where they interviewed everybody. NASA did a personal interview.
Wow.
It also had some journalism professors interviewing people. And they eventually whittled it down to only 20 people. And I somehow ended up on that list. And Walter Cronkite, Stephen Jay Gould, there were a lot of famous names on that list. Some of them have since died.
I know, the list grows smaller by the day. I like your odds.
So, well, not when I mentioned Krista McAuliffe. So what happened was somebody and by the way, the person who runs the civilian in space program for the United States is always the vice president of the United States. So Joe Biden technically right now is in charge of the program. At the time, somebody said, I think it was somebody in the vice president's office, you know, journalism is great, but we need to send up a teacher first. So they did. They did the same process, applications from teachers. They whittled it down to Krista McAuliffe. And of course, when she went up, it blew up. So after that, NASA said, you know, we still are going to keep this list of journalists, but we have to kind of make up for the Krista McAuliffe thing. So we're still going to send a teacher up. And subsequently, they did send another teacher up into space, but it went for such a long time. The shuttle program ended, and nobody knows what's going to happen with this list of journalists.
Well, that's fascinating. I had no idea. I work with you. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's really a big deal. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for a call from the vice president.
Better stay in shape.
But if all things work out right, all the other guys will die first.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Okay. Yeah. All right. You sent me a few things that you find peevish, that you pet peeve on, if that is the term. And I wanted to go through these one by one and have you kind of explain it to them. I agree with a lot of these, but by saying that, I'm actually doing one of your pet peeves. I'll get to that in a second. Let's start with number one. An interview is not a list of questions.
Right. And another way to put that is listen to what the person is saying and respond to what the person is saying. I hear so many interviews that are literally, you can tell listening to them that somebody is reading off a list. Somebody did research for them. They've got index cards and they read off the index card. Person who does that a lot, in fact, is Jimmy Fallon. He's got a list of questions and he makes no secret about, he holds up the cards and says, well, I understand that you were a swimmer in high school. And then, of course, the person he's interviewing says, no, I don't swim. So,
and then moves on to the next question.
Yeah, which gets back to your Wikipedia question, too. Yeah. But if you have a list, I mean, it's good to prepare with questions, and you have to have specific places to go. But if, for example, you're interviewing somebody about running for a politician, the politician says, well, that happened about the time I killed my first wife. I was running for office for the first time. And your next question is, so did you win that first election? You know, hey, listen to what they're saying. So your interview should be based on, you should direct the interview based on how your guest is responding, what the guest is saying. I hear so many interviews where they're just not listening. They're going from a list of questions.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. So let's move on to the next question.
I don't get it.
It's not about you. You don't want to hear everything that I know, Richard, because I'm smart. That's why I'm doing the interview.
The pontificating interview. You know, the best person to do an interview with somebody, well, let's take physics. The best person to do an interview with another person about physics should be a physicist, because he knows exactly where to go to get the good stuff. The problem is that the physicist will try to impress everybody with what he knows and use language and jargon that nobody else appreciates. I used to do one of my former lives. I worked with a group of people who coached non-professionals on how to do media. And you've done some of this too, media coaching, yes, where a company calls you in and says, please tell our executives how to behave during an interview before a live audience on a radio and so on. And what we discovered was that the problem was that doctors, when they're being interviewed, are very afraid of looking bad to other doctors in the audience. So they will talk like a doctor. A banker will be very afraid of looking silly to other bankers in the audience, so he'll talk like a banker. And your job as an interviewer is to have deep knowledge about what you're interviewing, but not to show off and tell people that you already know this stuff. You are their surrogate, so you're supposed to act like a member of the audience would act in a situation like this. So it's not about you.
I find that a lot. I don't want to call out NPR.
Of course, go ahead. Yeah, I find the same thing. Yeah.
I love Terry Gross, but she has a really good habit of doing so much background information on a guest that she's telling them things that they don't even know about a poem they wrote in 3rd grade, and she's like,
yeah. Well, that gets me to something that you and I have not discussed yet.
Okay.
And that is asking questions that can be answered with a yes or no. So, for instance, in your example, you say, now, you were a swimming star in high school, but you gave up on swimming in favor of football. And when you broke your leg, you then decided you wanted to get into acting. Boy, that was really weird. And acting, it turned out, was a good thing for running for office. So, and then you end this setup by saying, is that true? Well, yeah. You don't go into 6 paragraphs and, you know, write an article for me. You can say something like, are you on the list to be a journalist in space? Well, yeah, that's a question to be asked with a yes or no. But you didn't precede that with a long preamble of information and merely ask yes or no. Let me say it.
Yes.
There you go.
The unanswered question is another pet peeve that you sent me.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you and I both do this. We instruct students in courses that require the student to conduct an interview. Okay. And most students or people who are interviewing for the first time really feel like it's rude to ask somebody to really answer the question. And people will manipulate you. They will take advantage of this. You will ask them a question which they don't want to answer, and they will very carefully bridge to something else. So it sounds like they're answering the question, but they're not. It's not rude to say, gee, that's great, but you still didn't answer the question. And you've got to learn to say that. And there are very few professional interviews, especially television interviewers, who actually do that. And again, you mentioned NPR. I listened to an NPR interview about a week ago in which somebody was talking about monetary policy and never once answered 4 or 5 different direct questions. And the interviewer never said, excuse me, you didn't answer the question. So you got to do that.
And you get that. I mean, right now is the time for that. Politicians are great at doing that.
Yeah, yeah. And you can hear that during the debates where they actually, and I've heard very few of the interviewers during the debates, the moderators, actually say that. You did not answer the question. They do sometimes, but it's not. I just want to tell everybody who's embarking on interviewing for the first time, if somebody doesn't directly address your concern, it's okay to say that they didn't address your question.
Since we are, how about running out of time? That's
yeah,
that's a good way. That's a good place to wrap up.
This is actually professional advice as well as interviewing advice. It has to do with job interviews. It has to do with meetings at work. If you call a meeting with somebody, or somebody calls a meeting with you, and you go into that person's office, you want to be in control of when the interview ends. If you go in for a business meeting with somebody, you should envision in your mind, close your eyes and envision how the meeting is going to end. What's the last thing you're going to say? Are you going to shake hands? And when you go into an interview, whether it's an interview like this one, or it's a job interview or whatever, when you know in your mind, you can envision how it's going to end, you become so much more relaxed through the whole thing because you're not wondering how is this going to end. The worst way to end it, of course, is, oops, sorry, we're out of time. That shows that you really weren't thinking about heading toward a goal in your interview.
Well, we're out of time.
Go on.
Actually, I didn't want to end on that. I had something else I wanted to end on. I wanted to see if this bothers you as much as it does bothers me. It's called parroting. So, Richard, what's your favorite color?
Well, I think my favorite color is green.
So your favorite color is green. Okay, next question. That's my number one all-time pet peeve. That I mean, you see, professional journalists do it all the time.
Yeah, and I think the reason they do it is they're just not fast enough thinkers. They're not really into the conversation the way they should be, and it's a way to stall. You're just buying time. You're parroting because you don't know what else to say, and while your mind is churning the next possibilities for the interview, you have to blurt out something. So you just repeat it. I think the best example of that is, I don't think anybody in the audience will get this, but you and I will, is Bob and Ray's famous interview about the Komodo dragon.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And they do some great examples of what not to do in an interview.
I'll have to post that up on one of my blog
posts.
Oh yeah, it is a great one. I'm going to end with a question I ask all my guests because it's an important question. If you, my friend, were a sandwich, what would you be? And
pastrami.
I don't mean. Oh, see, you know the answer right away.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because I would say it's not if you your favorite sandwich, but if you were one, you would be pastrami. Why is that?
No, I like pastrami as a representation because it's not healthy. It's something you do not to survive, but it's a feel-good thing. And it's very, very difficult to find a good one.
There you go. Richard Hart, Emmy Award winner, journalist, teacher, philanthropist,
and friend to animals everywhere.
And other things. Thanks, Richard.
Sayonara.